Welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I am here with a wonderful young lady. You know, I've heard so many good things about this woman who went out to a country in Africa, and she came back and told her story. Her story was so impressive. Somebody said, man, you have got to talk to this girl. You have got to talk to her. Savannah Smith, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Well, look, let me tell you, suffice it to say that after I heard so much about you, I was impressed and wanted to talk to you mostly to learn, okay? Because you've had an experience that most of us have not had in several ways. So let me first ask you, tell me a little bit about who Savannah Smith is, how you grew up, where you went to college, that kind of stuff.
Well, I'm from Houston, Texas, specifically Porter. I graduated from Vassar College class of 2019 with a double major in Africana Studies and Political Science. Outside of my academic studies, I also love dance, so I was involved with dance on campus with choreographing, creating and producing shows, things along those lines. And I also studied abroad my junior year, which after graduating led me back to Cameroon in West Africa on a research grant for 9 months, where I focused.
I don't want to get there yet. I still want to hear more about you. Okay, I know what you've done. So, weren't you like a ballet dancer or something like that too?
Yes, I did train with a pre-professional ballet company in Kingwood called Kingwood Dance Theater. And then I continued in college with VRDT, Vassar Repertory Dance Theater, as well as Fly People, which is a student-led organization. And it was just so fun and wonderful.
Yeah, well, that is pretty cool. I don't think you were able to use too much of your dancing out there when you went abroad, did you?
Believe it or not, it pops up in unexpected ways.
Oh, not bad. That is cool. That is cool. Did you become a teacher then, or?
No, but you take classes, you have experiences with people. It's amazing how the arts can always connect you in different ways.
That's true. That's true. I've heard that. They said like music is a great connector, and I guess the arts, all that kind of stuff, because I guess that's sort of a human nature kind of a thing, But anyhow, so I understand that you then got some sort of a fellowship to go abroad after you're done with your degree. By the way, what is your degree in?
Political Science and Africana Studies.
Oh, cool. So was that sort of the genesis of you going out there to Cameroon?
Yes, it was. So sophomore year, I was taking French classes with a major in Africana Studies. I figured, why go to Europe? I need to go somewhere in the diaspora, and Cameroon was the place. They speak French. It's also a bilingual country, even though it's mostly Francophone. So I was able to have that immersion experience. The topic of the program was development and social change, and there was so much traveling and a homestay experience, and actually dance classes there as well. So
cool.
That's what led me to ultimately choose to go to Cameroon, and the first time was one of the best experiences of my life. And after that, I was like, I have to go back.
Oh wait, so let me back up a second here. You said it was multilingual, right? So you went there. I guess, do they speak English as well, or as one of the major languages?
Yeah, so technically it is a bilingual country, one of the few bilingual countries in Africa. But the main language is French. That's definitely the lingua franca, because 80% of the country was colonized by the French, 20% by the British. So when you're in Francophone areas, it's mostly French. When you're in Anglophone areas, you have English, but a lot of it is also Pidgin English. So there are multiple languages going on. The majority of people are, of course, bilingual, trilingual, etc. But French and English are.
Now, is there also a native language that they speak other than one of the colonizers' languages, or?
So, yes, there is. For every group, every place you go. If you're in the center area, they're called the Awando. it's the Beti,
Mm-hmm.
and Owando is the language. For example, one of the places where I was called Ituameki, and that is a
Mm-hmm.
name that comes from that language. And in Douala, which is the financial capital, those are literally the Douala people, and the language is Douala. If you're with an autochthonous group, which is basically indigeneity, but a different way of orienting yourself, like son of the soil. They speak their languages. So if you're with the Bageli, they speak Bageli. That's the language.
Mm-hmm. Now, I noticed you talked about the way you interpreted that. It seems like within this one country, there are maybe different kinds of people, just like in America, we have, Black people, white people, Latinos, and all that sort of stuff. Do you have that sort of a difference in ethnicities that you've seen out there that are pretty different in the way you see them?
Absolutely. I think identity is something that is always changing depending on where you're at in the world. For example, when we're here in America, we're all Black, but there's different types of Black, same thing there. And that's definitely true. The first layer is the language. Are you French speaking or are you English speaking? From there, it breaks away. All right, so are you from the West region? Are you from the East? Are you from the South? Where are you? Are you Bamaleke or are you Banjul, which is like kind of the same thing. And so it breaks down from there. And there are those divisions for sure.
Well, Savannah, why it's so important for, I think, Americans and others to be able to see these cultural differences within the countries. We have a tendency here to treat everything as a monolith. Sometimes we even think about Africa as a monolith. You're there in Cameroon, and you can see that there are differences and things that people have to be cognizant of, including when they're going in to have political issues within any one country. So, I think having you there is so important. And having others there is so important, so that what you bring back to us is, look, it's not a black and white issue we talk about. And there are different levels of abstractions that we have to know about. I think that is what's so important in what I'm getting from you. Now, I imagine there were some political issues there when you went. Are there any of those that you can talk about that you would want to talk about?
Absolutely. It would definitely be related to my research, but also backtracking a little bit, I do want to just add on to your point that it is important to think of identity not as something that is static, but something that is constantly changing, because when your identity changes, or when you think of it as changing and not static, but fluid, it really changes the politics. And so when you think of Africa and Africans, not as a monolith, but as having agency and also being actors in history, it also changes how we engage with others. They're just other cultures.
You're taking this into a place I hadn't thought about taking it. Project that back here to the United States, because I think that is prescient what you just said. You're talking about us evolving and it not being static. How do you bring that to not even necessarily to Africa, but here in the United States, and how we deal ourselves as interacting people?
I think the best thing I can draw from is my own context, Africana studies. So, for example, with DNA testing, so many people love, especially Black folks in this country, love to use DNA tests almost as a way of redemption. How do I figure out where I come from? So let me do this test, figure out which place I can trace back to. I could trace it back to Cameroon. I could trace it back to Ghana. I could trace it back here, Ivory Coast. But if you really think about it, so much time has passed between the Middle Passage and the slave trade. And I'm not trying to deny that there isn't an importance in tracing back, but it changes when you think about how much time has changed and how boundaries have changed. For example, a lot of these countries decolonized in my father's lifetime. I can trace myself and say I'm Cameroonian, but what does that even mean? When within it, there's so many different identities. There's a war going on. So the nation calls it a crisis, but it's a war. And who knows, in 5 years, there could be Amazonia. So now do I trace myself back to Amazonia or Cameroon, or can I do both? Or do I recognize that identity is something that is constantly changing? And depending on how you see yourself, it also determines your political commitment. So it's just something to think about, and it really makes you engage in the world differently.
I wish that more people could understand that message, because I just took that and try to internalize it. I'm originally from Central America, from Panama. And when I go back, there's something that you said that I actually noticed. My life took a different turn as I've spent all these decades here in the United States, and Panama continued to evolve in Panama's way. And on return, since I return maybe every 5 years or so, yeah, you're absolutely right. There is that divergence, if you will, where exactly what you said. Yes, you may have been from Cameroon, your lineage, but what does that say as far as your connection to Cameroon? I love that.
And I think it's important to still remember where we come from, because at least in an Africana context and diasporic context, we might be facing things here in the U.S. and let's say the situation is different there in America. I mean, in Cameroon or anywhere else in the world amongst, I guess, third world persons, period. Mm-hmm. But it all comes from the same structure. It comes from white supremacy. It comes from global capitalism. It comes from a history of imperialism and colonialism. So even though our challenges are different, they are connected. And I guess what I'm trying to say is we don't have to have the same identity, the same exact history. We don't have to be literally together to be moving together towards the same goal or decolonization, like true decolonization or anything.
And like the human goal. Yeah, exactly. So tell me a little bit more about your experience as far as what you saw there politically and what you wanted to take out of there.
Yeah, so I guess the first thing I can talk about is my research, but I'll start there and we can branch off because that was, of course, the thing that brought me back. So I was focusing on land issues, specifically agricultural related land acquisitions. And within that branch, it seems kind of boring, but it's actually very exciting to me. Folks who have been displaced. So women, indigenous communities. In Cameroon, it's more autochthonous communities, which is a different way of indigeneity. It's not so much of, who was here first in the land, but it's like, how do you orient yourself to the ground? Autochthonous means son of the soil, as if you were like born from the earth.
Nice.
And then small farmers. So the questions I was asking were, how did this displacement happen? What structures allowed for it? What impact does it have on displaced communities? And how do they enact their agency in spite? And then from there, it's always the big question, well, what do we do? How do we look at the structure? How do we look at the agency of folks and reimagine how we exist? So for example, one of the women I interviewed with, or groups of women I interviewed with, was from this land acquisition called Sokapom, which is primarily known for the production of palm oil. This one company produces about nearly 50% of the domestic demand. And it originally was a national company, but then it privatized for profit. So when I asked her about the challenges that women are facing or that people are facing, period, she talked about accessing their own personal farms, which their land was taken for the land acquisition. And there's also the issue with land law and just getting to your farm. The gendarme or the military had arbitrary checkpoints on public roads and would demand things, not just money, but also women's bodies. And it wasn't always just demanded. It was taken in both ways, which brings up issues of STDs, STIs, unwanted pregnancy, health. There's issues with respecting contracts, pay for those on the plantations. And many of these plantations, you find internally displaced folks from the North and Southwest, which is where the war is going on, who seek refuge, not just to work, but to literally live.
So let me interrupt for a second and ask you, because I want to see if I understand what you're saying as well. Are you saying that this was a place of, let's say the little farms, people did your palm oil or whatever other farming, and then we got a new economic structure that was coming in to the system, and within that economic structure to effect it, we started to have the violence against women. We started to have the taking of property, etc. Is that what I'm to understand from what you just said as well?
Yes and no, because everything you said sounds just like what happened during colonialism. It's really not that different. It's just in a new language.
Wow.
It was a national company, and now it's a privatized company owned by the French. A key player in French Afrique called Bolloré.
Wow.
And then there's issue of wage labor, the indigenous communities who can't access their land. So that's what it is.
Exactly. Okay. Wow. So then.
It comes with a lot of issues in all sectors, from health, access to land, gender equality, even the environment and pollution, because one of the issues she was talking about was that a lot of the fish have died. So people whose income were from fishing, they can't, because there isn't anything. There's a lot of pollution, issues with respiratory disease, tuberculosis, and eye issues. There's also issues with undocumented folks who now seek assistance from companies over the government. So it's a lot, and it's complicated, and you can read resistance, you can read a structure, you can analyze it, talk about it. But at the end of the day, it's always, what are we going to do? And something that I'm still grappling with is, how do you take a look at one issue? Well, not one issue. How do you take something like this? Because this represents just one of what's going on in one country. And if this is going on in one country, what's going on throughout the whole world? These are themes of displacement, access to land, construction of gender, womanhood, gender-based violence, capitalism, the plantation, empire. And one thing I forgot to mention is that with a lot of these companies that are coming in with these plantations, it's not just former colonizing countries. It's not just France. It's not just the British. It's not just America, but it's also China.
Right. They have a big footprint in fact, they're replacing the United States as the dominant capitalist structure in a lot of the lands, including Latin America. So that exactly. So that is what we're seeing. So tell me a little bit about what you can say about this war and its impact on the country, and also its impact on you, what you saw out there.
Yeah. So just a brief synopsis of the war. Like I said, Cameroon was originally actually first colonized by the Germans. Then the French and the British during World War I decided, all right, we got to defeat these Germans. Let's go into their colonies and take them. So the French took the colony with the assistance of the British and said, fine, you can keep this top piece, which is next to Nigeria. We'll keep this part, the majority of it, because the UK was like, or the British were like, we don't really want that part as much. You can keep it. And so after decolonization, the French decolonized first, then the British. But I don't know if I should say this. I hope no one comes after me. I personally believe there was some backdoor deal where the British and the French were like, all right, let's keep this top part with you, because in that spot, that's the majority of the wealth of the country.
Natural resources.
Yes. So originally it was a republic of the federal, like a federal republic, two different countries within one, basically. But then over time, the president said, now we are La République, we're all together. And it was this challenge of like, let's assimilate them. Let's change the language, change the structures. Let's bring everything to the center of Cameroon and French-speaking part. And folks were like, you're taking so much of us away. Like, what? You can't take away, you can't destruct our structures. You're taking away our power. And from the beginning, people have been saying this, and it's finally manifested itself out into what we have now, which is the Ambazonian separatist movement or the Anglophone crisis. And so that's what's going on. But within my research, excuse me, I was noticing how a lot of IDPs, internally displaced persons, like I said earlier, were fleeing and not to a lot of urban areas. And also, like I said, the plantation. I was at this one plantation. It was really sad because everything was provided for by the plantation. The homes, which had no running water, the schools, mind you, there was just one pump for an entire community, like 6 communities within this thousands of hectares. And at this school, there is an English-speaking school and a French-speaking school. There were 300 students for the English-speaking school with 3 teachers.
Wow.
And anytime the principal was telling me if they heard loud noises, some of the kids would drop to the floor because they were afraid of shooting that would go on.
Wow.
And it's just a struggle. There's so much to say about the challenges that internally displaced persons face. But one thing I will have to say is that with any crisis, with any war, we always talk about refugees, and they do deserve to be recognized. But for every refugee, you can just imagine how many people aren't able to leave.
Exactly.
And fleeing within their own countries because they don't have documents, maybe their homes were burned down. And so now they don't have their birth certificate, passport, or maybe never had a passport, ID card. Now they're undocumented in their own country. So it's just, we could talk about this for.
Savannah, there are many times people go into other places, whether they be colonists, and to put it bluntly, I think it's sort of an excuse for a reason to go in and take over. But they think people need saving. The Pilgrims came to the United States for selfish reasons, but they believed they had to save the natives. They believed they had to purify the natives. Tell us a little bit about your feelings on that.
Yeah, so I guess the first thing I want to say is that every time I talked about going to Cameroon, a lot of people would be like, oh, where is that? And the second thing, most of the time, wouldn't be a question. It would be, oh my goodness, those people are so lucky. You're going to be changing so many lives. You're amazing. And I would look at them sideways and be like, I'm actually going there to learn. When you engage in any community that's different than yours, or any culture, or any country, or any space, you have to go in with humility and respect, because as a researcher, the field of anthropology, for example, which is where I get a lot of my methods, have been used for the exact things that you're saying, to make somebody other, freeze them in time, and to colonize and dominate. So I guess my biggest message is that people don't need saving. People never have. At the end of, or a bunch of money thrown at them. And yes, I'm talking to you, Jeffrey Sachs. If anything, folks need knowledge. And when I say knowledge about the power that they have and how to use it. And then for us on the other side of our job is to do what we don't want to do, restructure power. And also, the way I'm framing it makes it very us versus them, when in many ways we have us versus them within our own identities. I'm from the West, I'm from America, but I'm also a woman and all of these other things. So I have some other, but I also have some that, us or whatever. So that's what I would have to say. People don't need a handout. they need power to be restructured, because what I realized is that in every space, folks are going to figure out how to survive. And most of the time, it's not always with tears down your eyes how you might expect. People have agency and they always use it.
Now, let me ask you something, Savannah. You're back here. Was your term up, or did COVID-19 cause you to come back prematurely?
COVID-19 did cause me to come back before the end of my term.
Now, when this pandemic is over, which I'm sad to say that I think it's going to be longer than most believe, will your research grant still be in effect for you to go back and really do what you want to do out there?
Absolutely not.
Did you say absolutely not? Okay.
Yeah, it's over. It's done.
But you did say that you think you want to go back. I think you felt a certain kind of love for the country.
Absolutely. I'd love to go back. I'd love to continue. And I do have a political commitment.
You have a political commitment to go back.
Yes. And love.
And love. That is great. I mean, I just think so many more of us need to do those things. Go from, here in America, for a long time, we've learned to just follow a particular pattern. And it is a capitalist structure. You know that. I heard you use a few keywords that points out that you really understand the entire nature of the economic system, not only ours, but many others, which I think I'm gonna throw it this way on you, which I think it is your duty to inform Americans throughout. And one of the things that we do with this video is having a young person like you tell the story, because you have an old guy speaking these sort of revolutionary ideas. It's not as well taken as coming from somebody like you, which is much more palatable for folks to really, you're young. That is great. So COVID-19 played an impact in you coming back. Let's turn the story a tad bit personal.
Okay.
I know your parents had to be going crazy as COVID broke out, and their daughter is out there in Cameroon and not being able to get back. Tell us a little bit about that, because I think that's a story folks would want to know.
Yeah, my parents were stressed, but I do want to say this. I was very blessed because I was surrounded by a community. I had people who were looking out for me, making sure I was okay in Yaoundé, Cameroon. So I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful that I was safe, because I was one of those people who were, I don't know if stuck is the right word, but the borders closed and I wasn't able to get home. And I just want to say that because there are so many people who are still stuck, not just Americans, but other nationals from other countries, and are in worse situations where they don't have enough money. Maybe they don't have access to the medications they need. We just never know. Worse situations than I was in. So I just want to say that my situation was pretty good, relatively speaking.
Right.
So it was Friday, March 19th, that I received an email from my program that we could return home, and they encouraged us to. But at the time, I don't think there were more than 50 confirmed COVID cases versus America,
Right.
the United States. So at that point, I just felt like I don't know what to do. So I figured the State Department is over this program. Let me get a recommendation, a state or a Cameroon-specific recommendation from the embassy. And I wasn't able to get a hold of them till the following Tuesday, March 19th. And when I was on the phone with them, they recommended that I stay in country because the country was at a level 2. And after speaking with my parents, I went ahead and decided, you know what? I know they recommended me to stay, but let me just go ahead and book my ticket out. So I booked it for the Friday. So it wasn't even a week after the recommendation that I finally decided, let me go. what harm can a week do? Because the country wasn't even at 100 at that time. But on that Tuesday, we found out pretty late that the borders were closing, land, air, and sea.
In Cameroon.
In Cameroon, nothing in or out. And even the embassy was surprised. All of the embassies were shocked. And there were so many people stuck. I think there were 9,000 U.S. citizens total. That doesn't account for people who have American citizenship and just live there, but that just gives you an idea of how many people, American citizens or citizens, period, are all over the world and how connected our world is.
Right.
So I was there and I couldn't leave. The borders were closed indefinitely, land, air, and sea. So I didn't know when I would leave. And yeah.
Now, financially, how would you have taken care of yourself if you weren't able to take off?
So the end of my grant was supposed to end in May, but I had planned on staying until June. So I had enough financially if I needed to stay until June or beyond. Okay. But of course, we're in the middle of a global health pandemic. You want to be with your family. So that's how I would have been fine because I have people there who care about me. If worst came to worst, they'd be like, come live with us.
Right.
No problem. So that's why I say I was in a good position. It was scary because at the time, before the borders closed, I was nervous. I was like, I don't know. Because I was watching the news and I saw all of these Americans like rushing to go back. The airports didn't seem to be managed very well. People waiting in long lines like this close to each other. It's like if I'm flying through Charles de Gaulle and I go home, I don't want to bring something back to my family. What if I get trapped in another country? Because when those borders closed, everybody was rushing to the airport. What if I'm fighting for a ticket and I can't get one? And I'm out here at the airport an hour away from the city at like 1 a.m., which is very safe there. Or even if I manage to get a ticket and instead of going through, Paris, I'm going through somewhere else. Now I have to worry about credit cards. I have to worry about opening them up, making sure I can spend my money if I need to. What if I have to stay in another country for a night as a woman alone, young, and so Black? How we're not really protected. So I was just like, you know what? Rush to get home before these borders close and put myself in danger, or stay here with a community where at least I feel safe and call on this embassy to do their job tomorrow morning. So that's what I ended up doing. I only stayed for 2 weeks after the borders had closed, and then we were on a repatriation flight, which flights are still going out. And because I was on a program, they technically are paying for my repatriation flight, but we had to sign promissory notes. And something I want to mention is that is expensive. It was nearly, I think, $1,800 just for a flight.
Wow.
They chartered, and I've been watching the embassy alerts, and it's gone up to nearly $3,000 per seat. And you're not guaranteed a beautiful chartered Ethiopian flight. There are folks from Madagascar that came into DC when I came in, and they were on a medical cargo flight.
Wow. That is amazing. Well, you made it safely back home. You're with your family, and which is wonderful. What's next for Savannah Smith?
Also, can I go back just real fast?
Absolutely.
I also just wanted to mention that throughout the whole process, it was a little nerve-wracking and scary, but I do want to say that I wasn't. This disease is real, obviously. Hundreds of thousands of people have died and will continue to die. And that's not just COVID-related deaths from the disease itself, not collateral damage. But what scared me the most were the weaknesses in our systems. Wow. I feel like for every weakness, it just makes this virus so much stronger.
I am so happy to hear you say that. And I'm not from a joyous point of view, but for the understanding that you have that COVID-19 has done nothing more than expose malicious weaknesses within our system. And we need young people like you who understand this. I'm going to put it bluntly, to take the hell over what we haven't done.
Yeah.
In other words, that you can see that means much. Yeah. Because in what I do politically and speaking to a lot of older people politically, they don't have the wherewithal to see and articulate what you just did, which is so important.
And I'm going to take that a step further. I don't think it's just in understanding and seeing it, but also knowing how to handle it. Like, historically speaking, at least in my opinion, we always like to think in our boxes, in our sections, oh, the Black community is facing this, trans people are facing this, women are facing this, people who are international are facing this. But until we really look at all of these things as being, as people like to say in scholarship, intersectional and intimate and so close together we can't separate it, we're not really gonna be able to move ahead in the way that needs to be done. You can't separate the mess. It's all together. You might as well just dive right in.
Oh, wow. That is so true. I have this statement that I use all the time. Whenever we unite the barrios, the ghettos, and Appalachia, we would have won. And it's a stereotypical type of statement, but the idea is exactly what you just said. We have to realize we're all in this together. And once we realize we're in this together, then we can really start finding solution. The bifurcation is made because in bifurcation, you can create chaos. It's the same thing that you've seen in the insularness of what you saw in Cameroon, as you explained it. It's the same thing. Separate, you can conquer. When folks realize they have the same interests, we can win.
Right.
Give me a closing. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, but what makes it also so difficult too is that the danger is like after President Barack Obama was elected, we're in a post-racial society, we faded. We're all the same now, but it's also being different with the same goal and recognizing our differences and respecting it and not making it a who has it worse battle, but how can we make this all better together without eliminating those real differences.
So earlier I asked you what's next for Savannah Smith. So I'm going to do it one more time. What's next for Savannah Smith?
Yeah. Well, in the short term, I think I'd love to continue with project management, whether it's foreign service, public service, nonprofit, but the long-term goals, it's so funny, every time I'm busy planning out the future, life happens, as Miss Rona has reminded us. So I'm just gonna keep myself open to life, work hard, and most of the time life gives me something beyond what I could imagine.
I want to add something to that, Savannah. There's one thing that we need, and that is thoughtful politicians. So please don't ever take that out of your purview, because we need thoughtful politicians, and you would make an excellent one.
Okay. I don't know. Making too much.
Savannah, you would not imagine how much I enjoyed this discussion and how many people will enjoy this discussion, because, we talk a whole lot about our millennials. We talk a whole lot about our Gen X. We talk a whole lot about our Gen Ys, and I think you're probably a Gen Y. You're not even a millennial.
I know. Gen Z. I don't know. I was born.
You're Gen Z. Actually, I think you're right. You're Gen Z.
I don't know.
I tell you, the one good thing that's coming out of this, right, is knowing that you follow. It feels good, because it really does feel good. So, Savannah Smith, thank you so kindly for spending this time with Politics Done Right. You've been very enlightening, and I think you're going to enlighten quite a few people.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm Egberto Willies, host of Politics Done Right, an independent news program. I post several news videos of interest every day. I ask you so kindly to subscribe to my channel, and please leave me some comments. Thank you very much.